The northern mountains did not remember when Xeeona Septhyr had first walked among them, or perhaps they remembered too well and had simply decided he belonged. Snow-lashed ridges and knife-edged passes stretched beneath a sky the colour of old steel. Wind howled through stone corridors like a living thing carrying the scent of ice, pine sap and distant smoke. High above the trade road, where cliffs broke into narrow ledges and jutting spines of rock, a lone figure stood motionless. Xeeona watched. He always watched. From this height, the caravan below looked fragile. Wooden wagons creaking beneath heavy canvas, oxen struggling against the slope, men wrapped in furs and worry. 2 guards walked alongside, hands on spear and sword, eyes scanning the road with the forced confidence of men who knew they were underpaid for the danger they faced. Xeeona knew the type. They always came north thinking the road would be kind. He crouched, boots planted in packed snow, cloak pulled close to his lean frame. The wind tugged at the dark fabric, but he did not fight it. He had learned long ago how to let the mountain move around him instead of against him. His breath was slow, measured, barely visible. He could not remember when he had first learned that trick. In truth, there were many things Xeeona no longer remembered. He did not remember a home, did not remember a mother's voice, or a father's face, if there had ever been one. Did not remember a hearth, or a name spoken with warmth. Only the mountains remained constant. Days blurred into one another here, or weeks, perhaps years. He had stopped counting. The northern passes had a way of stripping time down to something meaningless. You woke when the light came. You slept when exhaustion claimed you. You survived, or you did not. And Xeeona survived. A faint sound carried upward, too faint for the caravan to notice, the crunch of boots where no boots should be. The scrape of stone disturbed by careful hands. His eyes narrowed. Bandits. Not the drunken kind that preyed on lone travellers. These moved with purpose, coordinated, patient. He spotted them one by one as shadows detached from the rocks above the road, archers taking position along the ridgeline, blades waiting below where the path narrowed and escape became difficult. The 2 guards stiffened. "Did you hear that?" one muttered. "Probably the wind," the other replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Xeeona shifted his weight. The caravan never saw the attack begin. The first arrow never flew. Instead, Xeeona moved. He slid down the ridge in near silence, using stone and shadow as cover. His short sword remained sheathed. Steel was too loud for what came next. When he reached the first archer, the man was already drawing breath to whisper a signal. Xeona's blade flashed once. The archer collapsed without a sound, eyes wide, surprise frozen on his face as life fled him. Xeeona eased the body down, already moving. The second archer turned, just in time to see a shadow where no shadow should be. A hand clamped over his mouth. His short sword slipped between ribs with practiced precision. A sharp exhale. Nothing more. 2 bodies lay hidden among the rocks unnoticed. Below, the trap sprang. 4 bandits surged from cover, shouting as they rushed the road. Steel rang out as the caravan guards tried to form up, panic creeping into their movements. One guard thrust wildly, forcing a bandit back, while the other stumbled under the suddenness of the assault. It was already too late for them. Xeeona leapt. He dropped from the ridge like a falling omen, landing in the centre of the road with a crunch of snow and gravel. His sword was in his hand now, short and unadorned. No runes, no ornamentation. Just well-balanced steel, worn smooth by use. The bandits froze for half a heartbeat. Then Xeeona smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was sharp, dangerous, alive. The grin never appeared at any other time. He moved like a storm unchained. The first bandit barely raised his axe before Xeeona closed the distance, blade slicing across the man's throat in a single efficient arc. Blood steamed in the cold air as the body collapsed. The second lunged, screaming. Xeeona stepped inside the swing, shoulder checking the man hard enough to shatter balance, then drove the sword up beneath the ribs. The scream died into a wet gasp. The third tried to flee. Xeeona did not chase. He pivoted, flicking the blade outward. Steel bit deep into the bandit's spine, dropping him face first into the snow. The fourth hesitated. Fear finally won. Xeona's grin widened. They clashed in a blur of motion, steel on steel, boots slipping on frozen ground. The bandit fought desperately, wildly, but desperation was not enough. Xeeona disarmed him with a twist of the wrist, then ended the fight with a clean strike to the heart. Silence fell. The entire skirmish had lasted only moments. The caravan guard stood frozen, weapons half raised, breathing hard. One of them finally looked down at his shaking hands, then back at the bodies littering the road. "What in the hells?" he whispered. Xeeona did not look at them. The grin faded from his face as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a mask of calm detachment. He scanned the ridges once more, eyes sharp, listening for any sound that did not belong. Satisfied that the danger had passed, he wiped his blade clean on the snow and slid it back into its sheath. The guards found their courage at last. "Wait," one called. You saved us. At least take..." Xeeona was already walking away. He did not take coin, did not take thanks, did not even turn his head. By the time the guard reached the edge of the road, there was only drifting snow and the whisper of wind where the stranger had been. Later, in warm inns far to the south, merchants would speak of it in hushed tones. A shadow in the mountains, a blade that came from nowhere, a man who smiled only when he fought. And Xeeona Septhyr would continue walking the high passes, alone, forgotten and remembered only in rumour, long before fate decided that solitude was no longer enough. The days that follow the bandit attack passed much as the days before it had. Cold mornings, pale light creeping over the high passes, snow that never quite melted, only shifted from place to place by the patient hand of the wind. Xeeona Septhyr walked through it all without haste, without destination anyone could name. He rose when the mountains allowed it and slept when his body demanded it. Between those moments, he watched, always watched. The caravan he had saved was already far to the south, its wheels carving new scars into kinder roads. Xeeona did not follow, he never did. His path ran along the spine of the world, where trade thinned, where mistakes were paid for in blood or bone, and where memory itself seemed to freeze and fracture. He moved like a ranger should, light-footed, alert, reading signs others never noticed, bent grass beneath snow, a broken lichen patch where boots had scraped stone, the faintest alteration in birdsong. The forest still spoke to him after a fashion, but he did not answer. There was magic here, old magic, the quiet, breathing kind that flowed through root and branch, stone and stream. Xeeona knew this. He had always known it, in the same way he knew how to nock an arrow in darkness, or how to strike between ribs without thinking. Yet he did not reach for it. He relied on steel instead, on balance, on timing, on the honest certainty of a blade in hand. Was it a choice? The question lingered with him more often than he liked. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when he felt the forest watching him in return, waiting for him to listen, to answer, to step fully into the old ways of rangers long gone. In those moments, the magic felt distant, not gone, but muted, as if separated by glass. Perhaps solitude had done that. Perhaps walking alone for too long stripped more than memory. Xeeona did not dwell on it. Dwelling led nowhere useful. It was on a cold afternoon, when the sky hung low and heavy with the promise of fresh snowfall, that the mountains finally offered something different. The sound came first, steel on stone, a harsh, ringing clash that echoed through the ravines like a cracked bell. Then shouting, raw, furious and unmistakably dwarven. Xeeona stopped. His body reacted before thought could form. He lowered his centre of gravity, breath slowing, senses sharpening as he turned from the narrow game trail he had been following. The echoes came again, clearer this time. Anger, panic, pain, and something else. A deep, wet roar that vibrated through the rock beneath his boots. Trolls, Xeeona murmured, the word little more than breath. He moved toward the sound, descending into a narrow ravine where the mountain walls pressed close enough to choke the light. Snow lay uneven here, trampled and stained, the stone slick with ice and old moss. What he found made him pause. A mountain troll loomed at the ravine's heart, huge, misshapen, its grey-green hide scarred and thick as boiled leather. Each breath it took steamed in the cold air, its small, piggish eyes fixed on the figures before it with dull, hungry intent. Those figures were dwarves. 2 of them. They stood back to back, almost, but the word did not quite fit. Their formation was crooked, their movements uncoordinated. One was broad even by dwarven standards, his beard braided thick and heavy, his shield nicked and cracked from repeated blows. The other was leaner, quicker, wielding a short axe and a hammer with furious energy, and they were shouting at each other. "I told you this ravine was cursed, Boric," the lean one barked as he ducked a swinging club of stone and bone. "Any dwarf with sense would have gone the long way." "Oh, don't start with that again, Han," Boric roared back, barely managing to raise his shield in time. The impact sent him skidding through the snow. "You're the one who said trolls don't come this far north." "I said rarely, you granite-headed oaf. Rarely's not never." The troll slammed its club down between them, scattering rock shards and ice. Both dwarves stumbled back, shouting curses that echoed off the ravine walls. Xeeona watched from the shadows, lips twitching despite himself. They were in real danger. That much was undeniable. The troll was pressing them hard, herding them against the ravine wall with slow, brutal swings. One solid hit would end either of them. And yet, maybe if you hadn't stopped to argue with that goat herder back there, Han shouted as he parried desperately. "Oh, now it's my fault you can't keep your eyes open for tracks," Boric snapped. "A blind mole could have smelled this thing." "I smelled you, and that was bad enough." The troll roared again, frustrated, and backhanded Boric's shield, sending him sprawling. Han rushed forward instinctively, then hesitated, glancing back at his fallen companion. "Get up!" Han yelled. "Get up, you idiot!" "I would if the ground would stop spinning!" Xeeona leaned slightly forward, assessing angles, distances, the troll's rhythm. He could end this quickly. A clean strike from behind, hamstring the beast, then finish it while it raged blindly. He should, and yet he lingered. There was something almost mesmerizing about the scene. The dwarves fought bravely, no denying that, but their mouths worked faster than their weapons. Even as the troll bore down on them, they continued to bicker, to blame, to shout as if sheer volume might solve the problem. It was absurd, it was tragic, it was strangely dwarvish. "Next time," Han snarled as he narrowly avoided being crushed. "We listen to me." "Next time," Boric shot back, scrambling to his feet. "I'm tying your beard to a post so you can't wander off." The troll raised its club high, both dwarves directly beneath the looming shadow. Xeona's amusement faded. Enough. He slid his short sword free, the familiar weight settling into his hand like an old promise. Steel did not argue. Steel did not hesitate. Steel did what it was told. And as he stepped from the shadows into the cold light of the ravine, the mountains seemed to hold their breath. Xeeona did not announce himself. He did not shout, did not curse, did not draw the troll's attention with bravado or challenge. The moment had passed for such things. The ravine was too narrow, the air too tight with death. He moved from higher ground where the stone sloped just enough to give him purchase. He loosed his first arrow. The shaft struck deep into the troll's shoulder, just beneath the thick ridge of muscle where club met arm. Not a killing shot, never meant to be. The beast roared, a wet, furious sound, and staggered sideways as the limb betrayed it. Its raised club dipped, then crashed into the ravine wall instead of dwarf flesh, showering stone and ice. That was all the opening that was needed. Han did not know where the arrow came from. He only knew the club missed him by a breath and shattered rock instead. He threw himself forward with a hoarse laugh that sounded halfway to panic. "Ha! Missed me, you slab-faced." Beric was already moving, shield slamming into the troll's knee as if he meant to break the mountain itself. The impact did little real harm, but it forced the creature to shift its weight again, to lose balance it could not afford. The troll turned, enraged now, its small eyes searching for the new pain. Xeeona was already gone. He slid down into shadow, boots finding ice-slick stone without a sound, drawing another arrow even as he moved. This one took the troll in the thigh, bearing deep, tearing muscle meant for long strides and crushing weight. The creature bellowed and lurched forward instead, toward him. Good. Rage made it stupid. Xeeona cast the bow aside as he ran, the ravine walls closing in. He drew steel in one smooth motion, short sword flashing dully in the cold light. The familiar weight settled into his hand, steadying him. He did not think of magic, did not call to root or stone or wind. Steel was enough. The troll charged, club sweeping low this time. Xeeona ducked beneath it, close enough to smell the rot on the creature's breath, close enough that the air shook with its movement. He struck once, hard, into the already wounded leg, then rolled as the club slammed down where he had been. Pain flared along his ribs as stone clipped him. He ignored it. Behind the troll, the dwarves reacted without knowing why. Hahn rushed in with a wordless roar, axe hacking into the creature's side again and again. The blows were not clean, not elegant, but they were relentless. Boric followed, shield raised, hammer smashing into whatever part of the troll he could reach, hip, elbow, ribs, each impact punctuated by a curse hurled like a weapon. "Fall over already, you walking midden heap!" The troll spun, confused now. Rage pulled in too many directions. It backhanded Hahn across the chest, sending him skidding through the snow in a tangle of limbs and beard. Boric caught the next blow on his shield, the force driving him to one knee with a grunt that cracked into laughter. "That all you've got?" Xeeona did not look at them. He moved in close again, blade flashing up beneath the troll's arm, slicing deep where thick hide met vulnerable flesh. Blackened blood spilled, steaming. The creature screamed, reared back, and caught Xeeona with its elbow. The impact hurled him into the ravine wall. Stone slammed into his shoulder, his head snapping sideways. White light burst behind his eyes. He slid down, breath gone, snow filling his mouth. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. Then boots crunched. Hahn was there, axe buried in the troll's calf, hanging on with a mad grin as the beast thrashed. "You don't get to kill him!" he shouted at no one. "That one's ours!" Boric staggered forward, bleeding from the brow, his shield cracked clean through the rim. He tossed it aside and drew a small flask from his belt with shaking hands. "Oi! Pointy-eared!" he bellowed hoarsely. "Duck!" Xeeona rolled without looking. The flask shattered against the troll's chest, oil splashing across its torso and arms. The creature froze for half a second, confused, snarling. Hahn already had an arrow. He did not ask where it came from, did not ask how to use it. He simply set it alight from Boric's flint and loosed. Fire blossomed. The troll shrieked as flames crawled across its hide, feeding on oil and rage alike. It staggered backward, flailing, smashing into the ravine wall as burning flesh filled the air with a stench that turned the stomach. Xeeona rose. Slowly. He stepped forward through smoke and heat, ignoring the pain screaming through his body. The troll swung wildly, blind now, burning, dying but not yet dead. Xeeona waited for the moment when its weight shifted too far forward. Then he struck. The blade went in beneath the jaw, up through thick muscle, finding the place where even monsters failed. He drove it home with both hands, leaning his weight into the thrust until the troll convulsed and fell still. Silence followed. Only the crackle of dying flames and the rasp of breath remained. The dwarves stood where they were, weapons hanging loose, bodies bruised and bleeding. Hahn leaned heavily on his axe. Boric wiped blood from his eyes with the back of his hand. They looked at Xeeona, not with gratitude alone, not with suspicion. Something knotted and uncertain lived in their expressions, respect tangled with unease, relief shadowed by questions they did not yet have words for. Xeeona withdrew his blade, wiped it clean on the snow and said nothing. The mountains, at last, exhaled. The snow steamed where blackened blood had spilled, the heat of it fading into the cold mountain air. Xeeona stood among the aftermath, chest rising and falling, breath burning in his lungs. Around him lay churned drifts, broken stone, scorched hide, and the immense bulk of the troll now slumped and still, reduced at last to a shape that would never rise again. For a long moment, no one spoke. Hahn leaned on his axe as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. The blade was buried half an inch into the ice, his hands locked around the haft, knuckles white beneath the grime. Boric stood a few paces away, blood drying in a dark line down his brow, his shield split nearly to the boss. Both dwarves stared at Xeeona, not with triumph, not with fear, with something quieter, heavier. Xeeona knelt, withdrew his blade from the troll's corpse with a practiced twist, and wiped it clean on the snow. The steel came away dark, then bright again, as if nothing had happened. He inspected the edge briefly, nodded to himself, and slid the short sword back into its sheath. That was when Boric found his voice. "Well," he rasped, then coughed, spitting red into the snow. "I'll be damned and buried under it." Hahn let out a hoarse laugh that sounded like gravel rolling downhill. "I thought we were dead men walking for a breath there." Xeeona rose and turned as if to leave. "Oi!" Hahn called after him. "Hold!" Xeeona stopped. Slowly he looked back. The dwarves exchanged a glance, one of those quick, wordless looks forged by years of shared tunnels and near deaths. Boric pushed himself upright with a grunt and stepped closer, favouring one leg. "You could have walked off," Boric said. "Plenty would have." "I was already here," Xeeona replied. Hahn snorted. "That's not an answer." Xeeona said nothing. Another silence settled, awkward but not hostile. Wind moved through the ravine, carrying the stink of smoke and burnt flesh away into the trees below. Hahn reached into his belt pouch and drew out a dented flask. He hesitated, then extended it. "For what it's worth," he said. "Thanks." Xeeona looked at the flask as if it might bite him. Boric cleared his throat. "No tricks in it. Just rock gut strong enough to wake the dead. Or finish 'em." Xeeona took the flask. He drank once, short, controlled, and handed it back. The warmth spread faster than he expected. Hahn grinned through the blood in his beard. "You heading somewhere, elf?" "Half-elf," Xeeona corrected. Boric lifted an eyebrow. "That's so." "Yes," Hahn shrugged. "Still, you heading somewhere?" Xeeona hesitated. The honest answer rose unbidden. Away. Instead, he said, "Down." Boric gestured with his chin toward the tree line. "Village that way. Not much to look at, but there's ale." Xeeona studied them for a long moment. Two battered dwarves, cracked armour, bleeding, exhausted, alive. "I don't stay long," he said. Hahn chuckled. "We'll try not to cry when you leave." They set off together, descending from the broken hills into the forest below. Snow gave way to packed earth and pine needles, the world narrowing into a winding path between dark trunks. Xeeona walked a pace ahead, silent, alert. The dwarves followed, voices rising as the tension drained from their limbs. "Did you see the way it swung?" Hahn said. "Nearly took my head clean off," Boric laughed. "Aye, and you charged it anyway. like a goat with a death wish. Someone had to keep it busy while our pointy-eared friend danced under its arms. Xeeona did not turn. You ever seen one burn like that? Han continued. Smelled worse than a flooded mine, Boric groaned. Don't remind me. I'll not eat stew for a week. They talked as they walked, about the fight, about how close it had been, about how they'd almost had it even before Xeeona stepped in. The stories grew larger with every step. Xeeona listened without comment, the corner of his mind noting the familiar rhythm of it. Fear transmuted into bravado, death kept at bay by words. The village revealed itself slowly, a cluster of low buildings huddled together as if for warmth, smoke curling from a handful of chimneys. A place forgotten by roads and maps alike. No walls, no guards, just endurance. The inn sat at the edge, its door crooked, its sign faded beyond reading. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of ale, old wood, and smoke. A handful of villagers glanced up as they entered, took in the blood and weapons, and looked away again. Survival here had taught them not to ask questions. They claimed a table near the hearth. A woman brought mugs without being asked. Boric watched Xeeona over the rim of his drink for a long moment, eyes sharp beneath the bruises. Half-elf, aye, he said at last, then laughed softly. But you fight like stone. Xeeona looked up. Stubborn, Boric went on. Patient, like a dwarf who learned to walk lighter. Han slapped the table. That's it. Knew there was something familiar about you. Boric nodded. Different face, same heart. The words struck deeper than either dwarf seemed to realise. Xeeona did not deny it. He stared into his mug, watching the surface ripple as the fire popped. For a fleeting moment, brief and dangerous, something warm and unexpected settled in his chest. After so many years, he did not smile, but deep inside he was smiling all the same. Morning came quietly. The inn's hearth had burned low by the time Xeeona stirred, embers breathing faint warmth into the timbered room. The air smelled of old ale, damp wool, and wood smoke ground deep into the walls by years of use. Somewhere below, a floorboard creaked. A mug clinked, life continuing, unremarkable and stubborn. He sat up slowly, testing himself. The ache was still there, shoulder stiff, ribs tender, but the sharp edge of pain had dulled. Boric's rough salves and Han's improvised bandaging had done their work. Crude, but effective. Dwarven healing favoured endurance over elegance. Across the room, Han snored softly, axe propped against the bed like a faithful hound. Boric lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hands folded across his chest. His eyes shifted as Xeeona moved. You heal quiet, Boric said. Not an accusation, an observation. So do you, Xeeona replied. Boric grunted. Habit. They rose not long after. Bread, hard cheese, thin stew reheated and eaten without ceremony. No one spoke much. What needed saying had already been said the night before in glances and half smiles and the shared silence that followed. Outside, the village was pale with frost. Smoke curled from chimneys. No one tried to stop them as they shouldered packs and stepped back onto the road that was barely a road at all. At the edge of the settlement where the path narrowed and split, one branch sinking south into forest, the other climbing east toward broken ridges, Han slowed, "Well," he said, scratching his beard, "this is us." Boric nodded. "Citadel's east. Stonewake Hold. Long walk yet." Xeeona adjusted the strap across his chest. "I go south." Neither dwarf moved. Boric studied him for a moment, then said, "You could." Han shifted his weight. "But you don't have to." Xeeona looked at them. Really looked this time. The set of their shoulders, the way they stood together without thinking about it. Years of shared tunnels and dangers written into posture and pause. "I don't swear oaths," Xeeona said. Han waved a hand. "Didn't ask you to," Boric added. "Travel's not binding, just shared ground for a while." Silence stretched. Wind whispered through dry grass. Xeeona hesitated. Then he stepped onto the eastern path. Han grinned, quick and fierce. "Aye, that'll do." They walked. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of boots and breath, of cold mornings and pale suns. They crossed ridges scoured bare by wind, descended into narrow valleys where snow lingered in shadows. When trouble came, it came fast and left faster still. Once bandits, half-starved men with dull blades and desperate eyes, tested them on a narrow stretch of road. The fight was brief, messy, and ended with the bandits scattering into the trees, wiser and lighter of courage. Another time, goblins, 6 or 7, lean and sharp, shadowed them through a ravine. Stones were thrown. A rush followed. It ended with 2 goblins down, the rest fleeing into holes and dark places. They did not speak of these encounters afterward. There was no need. On the 4th day, the mountains closed in. The open road ahead dipped into a long, exposed pass where wind scoured the stone clean and snow drifted deep. Clouds gathered low and heavy, pressing the world flat and grey. Boric stopped, squinting at the sky. "Winter's tightening," Han spat into the snow. "Road'll be murder if it storms." Boric nodded toward a jagged opening in the rock wall to the north. "There's a cave pass, old, narrow, cuts through the spine." Xeeona followed his gaze. The opening was dark, unwelcoming, but the air that drifted from it was still, warmer. 2 days, maybe 3, either way, Boric continued. Caves safer from weather, not from other things. Xeeona said nothing. They turned toward the cave. Inside, the light faded quickly. Stone closed around them, swallowing sound. Their breath fogged faintly in the still air. Water dripped somewhere far off, slow and steady. They walked a short distance before Xeeona slowed. He raised a hand. Han froze at once. Boric followed suit, instinct honed by long years underground. "What is it?" Han whispered. Xeeona listened. Boots, light, measured, not dwarven, not goblin. He crouched, easing toward the rock wall, peering ahead. There, faint shapes moving where the tunnel bent. Tall, slender, dark armour catching what little light there was. 3 of them, dark elves, patrolling. Xeona's jaw tightened. Behind him the dwarves waited, unaware, for now. He drew back, voice low as stone. "We're not alone." Boric's eyes narrowed. "What kind?" Xeeona met his gaze. "The kind that hunts quietly." Ahead, the sound of boots echoed again, closer now. The cave held its breath. Stone pressed cold against Xeona's back. The rock was massive, an ancient slab torn from the mountain's spine long before memory, and it sheltered them just enough to break the line of sight down the tunnel. Xeeona crouched low, one knee planted, fingers resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. He breathed slow, shallow breaths, measuring the air as much as the sound. Ahead, faint echoes moved. Boots again, measured, unhurried, too disciplined to belong to anything born above ground. The dark elves passed through the bend in the cavern like shadows given weight. 3 of them. Tall, narrow silhouettes wrapped in dark mail that drank the light instead of reflecting it. Their helms were open-faced, angular, cruelly elegant. Pale eyes gleamed beneath the stone's dim glow, scanning the tunnel walls, the ceiling, the ground itself. They were not merely patrolling, they were searching. Xeeona narrowed his eyes, angling his head just enough to catch fragments of their speech. Low, sharp syllables shaped by a tongue that tasted of old stone and deeper places. He caught a word here, a tone there. Frustration, impatience, something missing. Behind him, a whisper, too close. "Told you," Han muttered, breath thick with restrained fury. "Should have finished the last ones we saw. Dark elves never walk without reason." Boric hissed softly. "Lower. Your voice." Xeona's jaw tightened. Another whisper, this one sharper. "You hear how they walk? Like they own the stone. Makes my beard itch." Boric shifted, armor creaking despite his care. "This isn't the time, Han." Xeeona closed his eyes for a heartbeat. Stone, sound, breath, focus. He strained to listen again, but the dwarves' murmurs gnawed at the edges of his concentration like dull blades. One of the dark elves paused, just for a moment, head tilting, listening. Xeeona lifted his hand slowly, palm back, a silent command. "Stop." Han leaned closer instead. "If we wait too long..." Xeeona turned his head sharply, mouth opening to whisper. "Quiet." He never got the word out. With a sudden snarl that tore the hush apart, Han surged to his feet. "For the deep halls!" the dwarf roared. He burst from behind the rock like a thrown hammer, axe flashing as he drove himself forward in a reckless two-handed thrust, aimed straight at the nearest dark elf. The shout echoed violently through the cavern, rebounding off stone and ceiling, shattering any hope of subtlety. Time stuttered. Boric's eyes went wide. "Han! No!" Too late. Steel rang as the dark elf barely managed to twist aside, the axe scraping across dark armour in a shower of sparks. The other 2 spun instantly, blades sliding free with practiced speed, faces hardening into cold, lethal focus. Xeeona stared for half a heartbeat, disbelief freezing him in place. "Idiot!" Then instinct took over. "Move!" Xeeona barked, already stepping out from cover. Boric lunged after Han, cursing in his native tongue as he brought his shield up and charged, hammer raised. "You stone-headed bastard!" The element of surprise was gone, but not entirely wasted. Han's wild charge had cracked the rhythm. The dark elves were reacting now, not hunting. Their formation was broken, attention split, blades meeting steel instead of cutting unseen throats. Xeeona closed the distance fast, boots pounding against stone. His sword came free in a clean, efficient draw. He angled left, slipping between Boric's shield and the tavern wall, blade flicking out in a precise cut aimed at a dark elf's thigh. The elf hissed as steel bit flesh. For a brief, violent moment, it worked. Han hammered at one opponent with relentless fury, axe rising and falling like a grudge-given form. Boric fought beside him, shield locking blades aside, hammer striking with brutal, compact force. Xeeona moved like a shadow between them, each strike measured, economical, no wasted motion. The Dark Elves retreated a step, then another. Then they adapted. One of them, slender even for his kind, armour etched with faint sigils, raised a hand instead of a blade. His lips moved in a whisper that crawled along the stone like a living thing. Xeeona felt it before it happened. "Down!" he shouted. Darkness exploded outward. Not the absence of light, but its swallowing. A sudden absolute void slammed over them, devouring the cavern's glow, the outlines of bodies, the very sense of space. Sight vanished, as if torn from their skulls. Xeeona staggered, vision gone, instinct screaming. "Boric!" Han yelled somewhere to his left or right. Distance meant nothing now. "I can't see," Boric snarled. Steel clashed blindly. A blade hissed past Xeona's ribs, close enough that he felt the air split. He twisted, back pressing to stone he could no longer see. Sword held tight, breath slow despite the chaos. Darkness pressed in from every side. The cave had closed its eyes, and somewhere within it, the Dark Elves were still moving. Darkness ruled the cavern. Not shadow, absence. A crushing, unnatural void that stole depth and distance alike. Xeeona could not see his hand before his face. The world had collapsed into sound and breath, and the cold press of stone beneath his boots. He froze. Moving blind in a place like this was death. The Dark Elves did not share that weakness. He knew it with a certainty that sank into his gut like ice water. They were born to the deep places. Darkness was not an obstacle to them. It was a weapon. For the first time since the cavern mouth, fear touched him. Not panic, not dread. Real fear, clean, honest. Even their young were lethal in the dark. He had seen it before. Surface folk cut down without ever seeing the blade that killed them. He tried to listen, to feel the space around him, to read the air the way he did the forest. Nothing. Stone swallowed sound. The spell pressed inward, smothering instinct. Then, Han broke. A ragged roar tore through the black. "Come on then!" Metal shrieked as the dwarf began to move. No, thrash, swinging his hammer in wild, brutal arcs. Left, right, overhead, again and again. The weapon whistled through air, struck stone, rebounded, struck again. Sparks flared unseen. The echo slammed into the walls and came back doubled, tripled. Han was breathing like a bellows gone mad. Each breath loud, desperate, uncontrolled. Boric shouted his name. "Han! Stop!" But Han could not hear reason anymore. He had surrendered to something older than tactics, older than fear. Pure dwarven fury. Xeeona grimaced. Madness, but dangerous madness. The Dark Elves had not expected this. Xeeona could hear them now. Not clearly, but enough. Quick steps, repositioning, the scrape of boots halting, circling. They tried to close in, blades ready for a clean kill. They couldn't. Han's hammer filled the darkness like a storm. There was no pattern to exploit, no opening to slide through. Any step toward the dwarf risked being crushed by blind, unstoppable force. "By the stone," Boric muttered, half awe, half horror. Then, thud. Han's hammer struck something that was not rock. Something hollow, solid, deliberate. There was a deep click, low and resonant like stone acknowledging stone. The cavern answered. A grinding sound rolled through the darkness, massive and slow. Stone shifted. Something ancient moved within the walls. Xeona's breath caught as the air changed, pressure shifting around them. A mechanism. So that was it. The thing the Dark Elves had been searching for. Han roared again and swung once more, hammer crashing against the same hidden point. This time the sound was different. A terrible, crushing slam followed by a wet, sudden silence. Then, light returned. Not gently, not slowly. The darkness spell tore away as if ripped from the cavern by force. The world snapped back into shape. Stone walls, scattered weapons, shattered footing. And the sight made Xeona's eyes widen. 2 dark elves lay crushed beneath a massive slab of stone that had dropped from the wall like a guillotine. Armour folded, bodies broken, blood spreading dark across pale rock. The hidden door had opened and closed again. Only 1 dark elf remained. He stood frozen, pale face drained of all colour, eyes wide in disbelief. His blade trembled in his hand as he stared at the crushed remains of his companions. Xeeona exhaled once, slowly. A thin smile touched his lips. The same smile that always surfaced when death sharpened the world into clarity. The dark elf saw it, and understood. They circled each other in the dim cavern light. The elf recovered quickly, too quickly to be dismissed as a mere patrolman. His stance was perfect. Blade angled low, feet light. He struck first. Still flashed. Xeeona met it, parried, stepped inside the arc, drove forward. The dark elf was fast, very fast, his blade flickering like a serpent. 1 cut slipped through, biting into Xeona's arm. Blood ran. Xeeona did not slow. He did not even look. Boric sucked in a sharp breath. Xeeona! The ranger pressed harder instead. Raw force now. Relentless. Every strike meant to end the fight, not win it prettily. The dark elf retreated, eyes narrowing, surprised at the sheer refusal to yield. A feint. A twist. Xeeona stepped through the opening and drove his sword forward with both hands, straight into the dark elf's chest. The impact lifted him off his feet. The elf gasped once, soft, almost confused, before sliding down the blade and collapsing at Xeona's boots. Silence returned. Real silence this time. Xeeona stood still for a moment, breathing hard, blood dripping from his arm to the stone. Then he pulled his sword free and turned. Hahn stared at him, beard wild, eyes wide. "Well," the dwarf said after a long pause, wiping sweat from his brow. "I was gonna say you fight like a cornered wolf." Boric snorted despite himself. Hahn grinned, teeth bright against grime. "But I reckon wolves might take offence." Xeeona sheathed his blade at last, the smile fading as quickly as it had come. "Next time," he said quietly, "you wait." Hahn scratched his beard. "Aye," he said, "maybe." The silence that followed the collapse of the hidden stone slab was absolute, broken only by the wet rhythmic patter of dark elf blood hitting the cavern floor. Xeeona stood amidst the wreckage, his short sword slick and dark, his breath coming in shallow, controlled draws that burned in the stale subterranean air. He did not look at the crushed remains beneath the stone. He looked only at the shadows, waiting for the mountain to offer up another threat. It did not. The ancient mechanism had done its work, and his steel had finished the rest. As the adrenaline began to recede, leaving behind the dull throb of a fresh cut on his arm, Xeeona sheathed his blade with a sharp metallic click. He turned to find Hahn already busy. The leaner dwarf was not cleaning his axe or checking his wounds. Instead, he was heaving one of the fallen dark elves, the one Xeeona had run through, onto his broad shoulders. The dark mail of the elf, etched with sigils that seemed to swallow the dim light, scraped against Hahn's leather harness. "You intend to carry that rot?" Xeeona asked, his voice low and devoid of warmth. His cold, blue-grey eyes tracked the dwarf's straining movements. Hahn grunted, his face turning a deep shade of crimson as he adjusted the weight of the slender, armoured corpse. "Aye, every miserable light-drinking pound of it. It is a long walk to Stonewake, Hahn," Boric added, leaning heavily on his cracked shield as he wiped grime from his brow. "The air is thin enough without hauling a dead traitor up the spine." They began to move again, deeper into the old, narrow cave path that cut through the mountain's heart. The journey grew quiet, the immediate danger having passed, but the atmosphere remained heavy with the smell of damp stone and the metallic tang of blood. For hours the only sound was the rhythmic thud of dwarven boots and the occasional wet slap of the dark elf's limp hand against Hahn's armour. Finally, Xeeona stopped in a wider stretch of the tunnel, where the ceiling vanished into a throat of absolute blackness. He turned to Hahn. "The dwarves I have known do not keep trophies that stink of the deep places. Why carry it?" Hahn dumped the body onto a flat rock with a heavy thud and spat into the dust. "It ain't a trophy, it's a receipt." Boric sighed, the sound echoing like shifting gravel. "In Stonewake Hold they look at us, at me and Hahn, and they see inefficiency. That's the word the High Captains use. They say we've spent too much time on the surface, that our eyes have gone soft and our axes slow." "They mock us, Ranger," Hahn snapped, his fingers knotting in his beard. "Every time a dark elf patrol slips past the northern ridges, it's our names they curse over their ale. They say we're inefficient at holding the dark back. That's why we were out there, patrolling the heights alone, looking for a fight we probably couldn't win." Xeeona watched them, his expression a mask of calm detachment, yet he felt a flicker of recognition. He knew what it was to be judged by those who sat in safety, to have one's survival dismissed as luck. He respected the blunt, wounded honesty in their voices, a trait he found far more palatable than the riddles of his own kin. "Who mocks you the worst?" Xeeona asked quietly. Hahn and Boric exchanged a look. "That'd be Brumir Irongulp," Boric muttered. "Owns the Anvil's Breath Inn right near the King's Gate. He's got the King's ear and a tongue like a rusted rasp. He's the one who started the inefficient pair jokes." Xeeona did not reply immediately. He reached up, the pale light catching the thin scar on his receding hairline, and a ghost of a smile, sharp, dangerous, and utterly alive, touched his lips. "Let's move," Xeeona said, his voice holding a new cold edge of purpose. "I believe I have a use for your receipt." The arrival at Stonewake Hold was far from a hero's welcome. The massive iron-shod gates groaned open, revealing a city carved into the very roots of the world, but the dwarves guarding the entrance barely spared Hahn and Boric a glance. Those who did watch them pass whispered behind calloused hands, their eyes lingering on the ragged state of their armour and the strange, hooded half-elf walking among them. They reached the Anvil's Breath. Through the thick leaded glass of the front window, the silhouettes of dwarves could be seen laughing and hoisting heavy mugs of ale. Without a word, Xeeona stepped toward Hahn. With a sudden fluid strength that belied his lean frame, he grabbed the dark elf corpse by its mail collar. Before the dwarves could protest, Xeeona spun. The dark elf's body became a blur of black steel and pale limbs. It crashed through the inn's window in a violent explosion of glass and wood. The laughter inside died instantly, replaced by the heavy thud of the armoured corpse landing squarely on the centre table, sliding across the wood until it came to a stop inches from a stout, gold-braided dwarf behind the bar. Xeeona kicked the door open, the wood hitting the stone wall with a crack like a mountain breaking. He stepped into the stunned silence, his hand resting casually on the hilt of his short sword. Behind him, Han and Boric stood in the doorway, their chests puffed out, the shock on their faces rapidly melting into triumphant grins. Xeeona surveyed the room, his piercing blue-grey eyes locking onto Brumir Irongulp, whose jaw had dropped so low it nearly touched his apron. "Well," Xeona's voice carried through the tavern like a winter wind. "Who was asking for a dead dark elf?" Beside him, Han let out a roar of a laugh that shook the soot from the rafters, and Boric followed suit, their voices finally drowning out the mockery of the hold.